Hello humans! Hello humans! Just a second. There we go. Got a little hot here and had to vent out some of the heat. Got my chores done, heading back out. I mean, there's like 7 different planes depending on where you want to look. I usually don't get to see them this way. They usually are spraying off the coast and then it blows in over me. I'm inland now and just watching them build this stuff up. So if chemtrails go away, we're going to have to figure out what to do with all these pilots. Anyway, so I wanted to talk about Jean Baudrillard and this Hindu guy that I couldn't pronounce his name even if I could remember it all. He was, okay, so Jean Baudrillard was a philosophical thinker, actually a liberal philosophical thinker in the early 1900s, who came to the conclusion that liberalism was shit and you needed to get a different approach to things, and that conservative capitalism was the way to go. And he did this after an analysis and coming to the conclusion that humanity was in the process of building into a system of systems. So he lived at the junction in the early 1900s. He lived at the junction between simple human world and complicated human world. We live at the junction here 100 years later. We live at the junction of complications on simple world and complex world. And it's a difference in understanding. Now, Jean Baudrillard came up with this idea that humanity in his future would have to live within a system of systems, or rather we would discover that we were living in a system of systems. What's interesting to me is that, I see, when was he? So like 100 years before him, before Baudrillard, we have Yukteswar, this Hindu mathematician, and his mentor, Yukteswar's mentor in India, that I can't remember his name. It was, I think it had like probably 19 or 20 letters in it, a lot of S's and a couple of H's, that sort of thing, right? I think maybe there was an A in there as well. But in any event, I can't remember his name. But this one mentor that Yukteswar had in his yoga business Yukteswar was a mathematician as well as a yogi, okay? And his mentor was a mathematician and a physicist as well as a yogi. Now, if you think about the yogis, they're not like yoga instructors, right? They don't wear tights and they don't do show you how to do the, they don't show you the asanas. That's not their point. So when I say yogi, I mean a philosophical thinker, someone who is living as an aesthetic, not involving themselves in the material world, such that they would be able then to have more wherewithal, more time in their day, more energy to do serious deep thinking. And so that's what the yogis are. They're sort of philosophers, they're experimental scientists. And so you won't find that the grit people, so people like Eric Weinstein, Peter Thiel, I don't know what his first name is, Dr. Keating, even Brett Weinstein. So I give Brett Weinstein more credit than most of these guys, right? For an active, effective mind. But none of them they're all gritologists, grit first, grit always, grit uber alles. And they think consciousness arises from glomming enough grit together. So they have an ass-backwards view of our reality, in my opinion. But none of them, and because of that, because of their gritology approach to cosmology, they will never ever, in my opinion, seriously acknowledge that yogis are experimental scientists, okay? They are experimenting on their own minds. They are using their own minds as a platform for the analysis of our common shared reality and the formation of conclusions from which deductions, hypotheses, theories, and further experiments can be made. And this is organized, consistent, cohesive, concise, precise, constrained, well thought out, and not the bullshit that the gritologists think. Okay, so if you assume a gritology viewpoint of the world, that there's enough sand and you glom it together and you get God, then that so limits your view that you don't really have a grasp, in my opinion, of any of the systems that are operating around you. So in my opinion, Brett Weinstein's gritology view blinds him to like 90% of biology. He's missing 90% of biological systems and how they function because he's coming from a grit-only approach. Okay, and this grit-only approach is why Eric Weinstein has totally crapped out on his 15 alternate dimensions shit, mathematics. None of that is factual, right? None of it is valid. None of it is an appropriate hypothesis. It'll never be vindicated. It was a waste of his time to even bother, right? Because it's coming from assumptions that are entirely invalid. So, okay, so Baudrillard in France got into some real shit with all the communists and all the liberal thinkers of the time for going where they would not, which is to think logically about all of the systems that humans involved with and then come to a conclusion. And Baudrillard's conclusion that he came to was that we, as humanity, are coming into a understanding of systems within systems in which we live because the materium is structured that way, not because it is inherent and native to human nature, which is what Darwin and all these other people prior to Baudrillard had said, that humanity would develop this way or that way based on its own internal nature and the nature of humans and collective and so on. And Baudrillard felt that he had to disagree because he was saying we cannot develop change humanity outside of any of the parameters that are laid on us, any of the constraints that are laid on us by the system of systems that we live within, okay, which I call the materium. And when I say the materium, I'm talking about the system that allows matter to exist, that allows you to have spirit bonded to matter such that you can move around, shift yourself a little bit and put your ass onto something and sit, that there's something for you to sit upon, and that you as a physical being that's animated by spirit could move your ass over and set it down on that thing. So that's the materium, okay? It is a system of systems that allows for our perceptions of the world as we perceive this common shared reality of matter. Now, if you approach things from this system of systems viewpoint being the constraints to humanity, in other words, ontology, in other words, consciousness created the materium and universe, or universe and then from within universe the materium, then you get an entirely different view of how things work, and you can analyze things in an entirely different way. So if you don't have this view of ontology, if you just grit, then karma doesn't exist. There's no retribution. You come up with Aleister Crowley famous statement, doest thou, or doest thou shall, or doest thou will, shall be the whole of the law. In other words, whatever the fuck you want to do, go ahead. There's no recompense, there's no balancing, there's no, no contention around it, right? No issues. You can do any damn thing you want because it's all grit. Well, And so that's why we're in the problem we're in now, because this is the viewpoint of the Elohim worship cult, okay? They are 100% gritologists. They do not really believe in a God. They do not really believe in a created universe. They're so wrong that we could spend, and will probably end up spending, decades discussing how wrong they are. But, so, that's why we're in this particular set of pickles that we've got ourselves in, right? With these Elohim worship cult and all of their duplicity and all of this kind of stuff, right? That same viewpoint is what allows people to be lying fuckers about science, because do as thou will shall be the whole of the law. So if you want to cheat on a science thing in order to make money and create and become a multimillionaire and all of this kind of stuff, then have at it. Your model is James Keeley, okay? Your model is Corey Good. They just bullshitted and made money and stuff. Now, there is retribution. The real scientists, the experimental scientists, the active philosophical experimental scientists in Yogi land and in Taoist land and in Shinto and Buddha and Zen, all of these experimental scientists will be able to tell you, hey, you do that, some shit's going to rain down on you. Okay, as we see with Corey Good. And John Keeley, and it didn't go well for him, right, that way. So there are, as you go along, consequences to this, because we live in a system. So now, what's his name? Terrence Howard was on, he's an actor, he was on Joe Rogan, and he started spouting off a lot of the stuff that is quite valid, like Walter Russell's version of a periodic table and so on, which, by the way, Jean-Claude interviewed Ken Schwartz. Ken Schwartz is like a legit scientist, right? He's like a legit experimental physicist, and he's telling you in this interview with Jean-Claude yesterday on Beyond Mystic, he's telling you fundamentally, although he didn't actually state it this way, that Walter Russell's view of the periodic table is accurate. And we know that it's accurate because Ken is able to do his MOXIE fusion, metal oxide fusion, and take metal and up-level it to something else. So he can take a particular isotope of tungsten and turn it into gold, right, by up-leveling it to the next vibratory octave. And so, we can't really, we can change atoms. It's a question of how much energy we want to put in. But in any event, so Ken Schwartz can change atoms via MOXIE fusion, which validates Walter Russell, as Terrence Howard was talking about. But Terrence Howard thinks that Keeley is legit, so he's never researched him. Also, I think Terrence Howard is one of these guys who does not go in assuming that I always do that. I always assume that whatever human is on the other side of that is a real fucked up piece of work, and I'd better see if he's being straight about it or not, right? Anyway, so, but I also think that Terrence Howard has never read Synergetics by Buckminster Fuller and his team, because if he had, he would have had a mathematical approach to be able to provide to Joe Rogan that would explain all of this, and to some real extent even impresses the gritologists. The gritologists are really into math, how many little particles have we added up here, that kind of thing. Let's have a number, because it makes us feel good that we really understand the underlying grit, okay? So I love math, not particularly a fan of arithmetic. I use calculators for lots of boring arithmetic. But I love math, right? Love the derivation of formula, equations, and so on, which is entirely different, and frequently in the kind of math I do, doesn't really involve dealing with numbers. It's all symbolic, right? So it's a symbolic calculus, really. Set theoretic math, very high level symbolic calculus, which is basically what my WebBot system runs on, is the weighting and comparison of symbols at a very large level. Anyway, though, so if Terence Howard had read Synergetics, he would have had what I have, because I did read it, which is the formulary and the formulae for doing energy calculations. Because in our, as Jean Baudrillard and Vernadsky, the Russian writer of Biosphere and Noosphere, all of these guys have all come to the same conclusion, that we live in an energy-bound universe, okay? You and I can't create energy. All we can do is transform energy from one type to another and maybe get some work out of it, right? So we transform diesel into gases in an engine and extract some work, which is moving my ass from point A to point B. So Buckminster Fuller in Synergetics provides a framework which he called the vector equilibrium, which predates, and one could say could be used to challenge most of Terence Howard's patents on the structure of reality. Okay, so you know, the space between bubbles and stuff, that was all covered in Synergetics. And Buckminster Fuller laid it all out. But what he was after was not the shapes. He wasn't trying to create, you know, flying machines or any of that kind of shit. He wanted the energy calculations. Because he was right back there in the 1920s, back with Jean Baudrillard. We were moving from a simple system into a simple system with complications laid upon it. And he wanted the energy calculations to help guide him as to the very best ways to do things within our developing understanding of the system of systems. And energy calculations are truly the way to do it. If you know, for instance, that the sun puts more energy into our ecosystem, into Earth, into the atmosphere, into the planet itself, and so on, it puts more energy in a single day than all of humanity can transform in a year, then that tells you that humans ain't fucking with the climate. It tells you so much about the bullshit that the Rockefellers are putting out, that oil is a fossil fuel. Horseshit. Oil is actually created by the sun putting energy into the planet that goes down to the plasma core of the planet, and the plasma core reacts by creating petroleum as well as water and other minerals. So, anyway, though, Terence Howard, in my opinion, would be well served to read Synergetics and get a different approach on his stuff so far. What was that? Okay, so now, if we look at all of this stuff as a system of systems, as the materium itself is a complexity of systems, each of which is complex itself. So it's a complexity of complexities. If we examine our reality that way, then we can go through and look at the experiments that have been done by the yogis and by Zen meditators and all of this kind of stuff, and we can actually derive some very good functioning rules for our lives here, right? So I know factually karma exists, right? There is a system that deals with the distribution of energy at an abstract level, very abstract level, which is, you know, good or evil, harm or no harm, etc. There is a system within our system of systems that is intending to balance all of that. Hang on, I got cops here, flashy lights, cars trying to get by, all of this kind of shit. Oh, it's my buddy, the sheriff. Sheriff deputy's pulling somebody over for some kind of horseshit. And there's a lot of horseshit that goes on out here. You wouldn't believe it. Anyway, so karma exists. So there are many different things that you can analyze through the experiences and the conclusions and stuff from these experimental scientists that are not recognized by the gritologists, but are very much recognized by normal humans because we laud these people, right? If you lived near an aesthetic individual, you would laud them too, just because of the quality of their life relative to the energy that they're putting out, and you would respect that, right? Anyway, I mean, the likelihood is you would respect it just because these guys are tough sons of bitches and they walk their talk. Anyway, though, so we can anticipate that these guys are more correct than the gritologists would give them credit for or would ever allow. And so, in my opinion, it's worth reading the conclusions that a lot of these people came to. Now, there's a lot of yogis that have really mushy thinking, all right? They're just not really well advanced. There's a few, though. There's a few yogis like Yuktesvar. Now, Yuktesvar, he blew it, right? So his thinking was good on the yugas and a lot of the math and this kind of thing. But he had a major failure in his life. And that major failure was compounded by his mentors telling him, go ahead and do it, right? And so he had this idea, which I would have told him, dude, it's a waste of your time. It'll never yield anything. And here's why, okay? And his idea was that he was going to write the book that would unify all the religions, so we wouldn't have religious strife. And yet he did see at least parts of the structure in which we live, the system of systems that is the materium, and yet he did not see that part of karma that requires that religions not be unified, not be codified that way, okay? That it'll never happen because universe, the materium, needs it not to, right? So he blew it on that. He spent a lot of his years trying to reconcile all of the religions together, not understanding that much of Christianity is 100% bogus. Doesn't matter what version of the Bible you got, it's all bastardized up. And the Talmud is just truly a piece of horse shit, and that none of these things were written as they are claimed. So the Bible is from, the earliest versions of the Bible are in Greek. They're not in Hebrew, okay? So what happened was there was an experience. They wrote this experience down in Greek. Later on, someone translated it to Hebrew and left out tons of shit that's in the Greek because Hebrew only has 8,000 words and Greek had 250,000. And so there's all kinds of words in the Greek Bible that do not exist in the Hebrew because they just threw them out. They had no word that was similar that they could use. And then they took the Hebrew Bible and translated it back into a stupid form of Greek, from which they claim that is a copy, not the original. But the original Bible is in Greek, and it's from 300 AD, okay? And it likely did not involve any of the structures that we are aware of or that are claimed for it in terms of its writing, okay? In any event, so we live in this system of systems. It's going to be extremely complex. It has to be complex as its very nature because it has to take us more than a single lifetime, many, many, many more lifetimes than a single one in order to come to some understanding of it. If we could all grok it like boink, 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 it would be like, a non-challenging video game. So it'd be like, Invisible Space Aliens, or it'd be like Tetris or something, right? Just wouldn't hold your interest life after life after life. So that's the nature of our reality, is that it must be complex. And the complexity of complexities that is the materium has to be so complex that no individual human is going to be able to get into it and take it all apart in a single lifetime. Just the very nature of what we're dealing with. But there are rules and laws by which it operates. And you can use these rules and laws to your benefit, but you have to know what you're doing. So, for instance, there's this idea of a law of attraction. And there is an energy aspect to our materium that supports most of the thinking about that law of attraction, or supports at least the very basic fundamental principles of the law of attraction. But very few people understand that anything you do in this stew of energy, in this system of systems, is going to come back to you with other energetic inputs to you as a result of your having expended energy. So if you expend energy with the law of attraction, trying to attract certain things to you, you're creating ripples within the greater mass of energy out there that we call common shared reality, the materium, the place where our asses can sit on matter. And that those ripples might come back to you immediately, but they may take years to come back. So you need to really think about this shit. Now, most people won't. You know, it's going to be a bunch of 15-year-old girls that get this law of attraction shit in them, and they have no idea of consequences, no idea of anything. They're operating on their brains are being sloshed by hormones, and they just go off and do it. And so there will always be, in our system of systems, opportunities for humans to add further complexity by doing things in a very unmindful manner. And and that's where we're at, right? This is your materium, and welcome to it. There are rules and stuff. If you want to suss this out, you can do research, and then that research aids you in making decisions, so you don't make the dumb 15-year-old hormonal brain decisions of doing the law of attraction and then ending up with all of this blowback from universe. Anyway, guys, that's about it for the day. I really need to get into karma and some of the structure of all of that kind of stuff, but I'm back here now and I got to get my processing moving. I got another one of those to do. Damn. Anyway, so take care, and maybe I'll do one of these next week if I can. All right. Talk to you later.